Members, we form a quorum, and it's time to start our meeting. So I now call to order the meeting of the Bills Committee on Property Management Services Bill. Please invite the officials to come in. Thank you. The representatives from the administration have been set out in the agenda. The government has provided a paper in response to the matters raised at the last meeting on the 25th of November. So may I now invite Mr. Jack Chan to walk us through the response, and then members may wish to raise questions paragraph by paragraph. So over to you, Mr. Chan. Last time it was the meeting held on the 25th of November 2014. We have provided a paper setting out our response to the matters raised. I'd like to highlight some of the succinct points. First, information on buildings with different forms of owners' organizations. As there is no statutory duty requiring owners to inform the authority of the form of owners' organizations that they have set up. So HAD has no definitive information on this. However, based on the information available to us through our daily regular contacts with the owners, or information provided by the owners voluntarily, we know the percentages of different forms of owners or organizations set out in paragraphs 2 and 3. Second, self-management by OC. We propose to amend Cap 344 Building Management Ordinance so that important decisions to change the appointment of management companies would have to be passed by a general meeting of owners. However, we do not consider it appropriate to take forward such a requirement in the bill because the purpose of the bill is not to regulate the operation of OCs. Such matters should be provided for in Cap 344. So when it's time to amend the Building Management Ordinance, we would take on board such amendments. Third matter, licensing requirements for property management practitioners. We look at the academic qualifications, professional qualifications, year of working experience, and the suitability of the person in holding PMP license. It's set out in the bill. Simply put, for Tier 1 license, university degree, and depending on the degree held, there will be the requirement of the 3 to 5 years of working experience in property management, and also the professional membership of relevant professional bodies. For Tier 2, the practitioner must hold a sub-degree, a diploma sub-degree, or equivalent qualifications, and at least 2 years of local working experience in property management, at least one of which would be under the supervision of a Tier 1 PMP. And who will be required to obtain the PMP license? Generally speaking, that depends on the post the person holds in a property management service agency. So when the PMSC applies for license, it would have to provide the organization chart and the post holders of different posts in the PMSA. We'll look at the number of threads and areas to be managed, and then the authority will specify the number of posts requiring Tier 1 license or Tier 2 license, and the post holders concerned will have to hold the right kind of license. And the property management company have experienced changes in the management portfolio, the organization structure, or the post holders in the organization, then the authority must be informed. And what company will be required to obtain the PMC license? We have set out the 7 categories of property management services in the bill. And we're going to subdivide the 4 subcategories for the 4th one, that is the management of the environment of a property. Otherwise, they are all standalone categories. And all the different categories are explained in subsequent subparagraphs. When a property management company applies for more than one category or more than one subcategory, they will have to apply for a license. As for the offer of free advisory management service by some members of board officers, there's no need to apply for a license. And to clarify this in the bill, we are going to set out in the bill that only services, management services render for the payment of fee would a license be required. And also the difference between providing property management services and acting as a PMC. Our response is set out in paragraphs 19 and 20. Simply put, PMC provides definition as interpreted in the bill. All companies providing property management services can be regarded as property management companies, and they must obtain a license to act as a PMC. But if they offer only one category of service, then there's no need to apply for a license. How about Part 7? Other issues, owners or organizations, and so on and so forth. Do you wish to supplement? Well, the paper is self-explanatory. So we have been given a brief response for the issues raised at the last meeting. So, members, do you wish to ask follow-up questions? Shall we go over the response point by point? And we can also have a discussion on the relevant content. Every member will be given 5 minutes to start with. And if you have used up your time, please queue up for the second round. I believe that this is better for the orderly proceeding of our meeting. Mr. Yik Chi Ming, I would just want to raise a fresh question. JSM has sent a letter to Mr. Tony Chan. I just want to clarify this point. My corporation has our own properties, but we have set up a subsidiary. But it's done at an arm's length with a fee charging. Do these management companies have to obtain their licenses? Of course. And I'm talking about those who are very senior, experienced people, and there will be provisional license issued to them. I want to clarify that they don't need to take any examination as long as they have attended all the relevant courses. as I said last time, we'd like to ask them to attend all the courses prescribed. Not 100%, but a high attendance rate acceptable to us will be good enough. Mr. Chan Kim-po, I also want to talk about self-management. The reply is more akin to what you said before you became the chairman of the Disputes Committee, and that is to say, it must be passed by the owners' general meeting. But how is the wording to be set out in the bill, and will there be a criminal liability for any breach in the future? We are still consulting people over relevant matters, and we know that some other amendments will be carried out to the PMO. We have to be careful that there would be criminal liabilities for the non-compliance in respect to certain matters. So I think this has addressed the questions raised by you, Chairman. But we are concerned that if the property is covering a lot of grounds and it's a big estate, then would that be okay if we allow self-management? Mr. Chan, actually we have explored the issues quite thoroughly. We have given thoughts to the issues raised. We agree that there are concerns in the community. Although self-management by OCs, according to information we have been quite successfully done by some OCs, and the quality of service is quite good. Some people say that we should not ask them to get a license because that would be a nuisance to them. But if the OC has to manage many flats, then we are concerned whether the quality can be sustained. So if the OC has to manage a certain number of flats or units, then we have to consider what should be done. We want to, of course, we need to fine-tune our proposals, and we need to do it through this bill. So we are still awaiting further drafts from our legal advisors. So please give us more time to work out the proposals. I thank the administration for considering this proposal in view of the far-reaching implications. Actually, my question is similar to the one raised by Mr. Chan Kim-po. And this time, the legislative intent is to enhance the quality of a property management service. If it's self-management and it's a good job, of course, it will be good. But they are not professionals; they are just owners. And if you want to overrule this, you have to collect sufficient number of votes so that a property management company can be engaged instead. That may or may not be possible. So how are you going to handle cases like these? As we said last time, for OCs which are now doing self-management, what kind of assistance can be rendered? Last time we said that there were 10 special services that we may provide to the buildings self-managed by its OC. In these buildings, well, we would designate a liaison officer for each and every one of them, and also the frequency of visits will be higher to these buildings. and close liaison will be maintained with the OCs and the management committee through visits or telephone calls. I will also encourage the members in such a self-managed organizations to participate in our forums, and they will enjoy priority in enrolling for such forums and sessions. And we would make referrals for the access to other departments' services as a matter of priority. We hope by offering help to these OCs, we can enhance quality of service.
I have a follow-up. Mr. Chen, you have pointed out that for the self-management by OCs, you have said that you will work that out within the review of the BMO. But then will there be a sort of gap? Are you going to cover this by having so-called back-to-back drafting so as to prevent the possibility of having a vacuum or a gap? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll try to see if there is a solution. As I have said, when we do review and amend Cap 344, we'll try to address this issue as to how we can prevent having a gap. As I have said last time, there will be an alarm system. In other words, through our frontline liaison officers, if at the district level it is found that there is a problem. Now, if owners would like to migrate from management by a property management company to self-management, I'm sure signs will be and can be observed, and then we can explain to the OCs about the pros and cons of self-management vis-a-vis PMC. So we'll try to persuade them that unless they are fully confident, it's better for them to stay with a PMC. So we'll be having tailor-made services for them. As to whether there are better solutions to shorten the length of the vacuum, we are still thinking about it. Well, nobody would like to change the status quo if the management by property management company is good. So unless somebody would like to circumvent the requirements, nobody would be interested in changing the status quo. So you have said that you will be explaining the pros and cons to the owners, but I'm afraid it won't work. Mr. Yik, of course, this is also a matter of concern to us. Just now, Mr. Chen has said that there will be dedicated staff to help the OCs. Well, we do have liaison officers in our district members' wards, but my experience is that they are all young people, and they may not be able to be very discerning and look out for the tricky points. So I think it's better for you to get the more experienced liaison officers to go to the OCs. You're right. If we have to deal with the target buildings, we won't get the community organizers. In fact, we will be getting our own liaison officers and the more experienced liaison officers. And in special cases, the headquarters will also be alerted. Members, any other questions? No? Then I will have another follow-up and then we can move on. In paragraph 6 of the paper, it is said that the purpose of the bill is to provide for the licensing of business entities and individuals. So it is not the legislative intent of the bill to regulate the operation of OCs. I want to check with you whether this is the sole reason and it's overwhelming. And therefore, you are of the opinion that for self-management, the resolution by an OC to opt for self-management should not be sort of provided for under this bill. Mr. Chairman, you're correct. We have to make sure that we are true to the purpose of the bill, otherwise it will be too messy. We do have Cap 344 to regulate the OCs. So if we start to cover it in the bill here, then it will be too confusing. Mr. Chen, even under Cap 344, I think certain instructions and directives are also provided for in relation to the provisions under other legislation. Now, on the one hand, you're saying that Cap 344 will be the right place to deal with the matter, but then when we want to prevent any abuse, would you agree with me that the bill should also have a word on this thing? Now, maybe our legal advisor can help me. I want to know whether it is not the drafting practice to say that under Bill A, you will say that certain things have to be followed in relation to legislation B, say for example. Maybe our legal advisor can help. As far as the legislative intent of the bill, the purpose of the bill, I don't think it's just up to the administration to make a ruling. I think we can all comment on the scope of the bill. For the purpose of the bill, I think the main purpose is to regulate the PMCs. But then in Clause 7, there is an exception here, and that's about self-management. If you say that the matter cannot be dealt with in this context, I just want to point out that there is an exception in Clause 7. So maybe it is just a matter of revising the details of the exceptions. So maybe I cannot agree with you that this cannot be done within this context. I think it is arguable. And then for this bill itself, when you look at the interpretation part, mention is made of other legislation like Cap 344 or the company's ordinance. Yes, Mr. Chen, please consider this matter, and maybe members would consider amending the bill. So please consider taking up this matter while not departing from the purpose of the bill. Certainly, Mr. Chairman, we do appreciate this point, and we're trying to find a way to shorten the gap. Thank you. Mr. Yip, I have noted the legal advisor's viewpoint. I think the laws are specific, and this one is about property management services that is targeted at the property management companies. We have got another piece of legislation, Cap 344. That's about the multi-story buildings and the owners' corporations. Yes, different pieces of law, different pieces of legislation may have some common concerns. Of course, fire services, policing, etc. would also be involved in this topic. So my question is, we try to be coordinated while not affecting the legislative work. I'm interested in the example of the signboards of the buildings in the context of the building management. When we talked about whether signboards should be allowed, I think someone raised the question of doing it within Cap 344. So for large-scale housing developments, I think we want to have quality building management services, perhaps there should be a limit on the number of units that we permit self-management. I came late, but my experience is that if we are talking about a very large number of units and you still want to rely on volunteers to do the work of property management, then there may be gaps and there may be other problems. So as far as property management is concerned, I think it is something that we should consider. Mr. Yip, as to your latter question, I think the department has already answered. They're working on it. They would like to be given time to consider a solution. I think if you have got 1,800 or 2,000 units, I think that may be the threshold where we draw the line, whether self-management is permitted. They are trying to prepare a paper, Mr. Yip. Maybe legal advisor can also assist us again in the other question. That makes the issue more technical. Say, for example, at the electrical meeting, if somebody would like to move a CSA, as to the president will allow for the motion to be moved, I think we have to check whether the effect of the amendment will change the principles of the bill. That would not be allowed, but if you change the details, that can be allowed. Now here the bill is to regulate the PMCs, but then the administration itself in Clause 7 has also touched upon the OCs. So can we simply say that the administration itself claims that the purpose of the bill is merely to regulate the PMCs and not OCs, and therefore a CSA of such a nature will be ruled out? The President may very well say that it is a matter of amending the details of Clause 7. In that case, maybe permission will be given. So it's a matter of the degree and what is meant by principle and what's meant by details. I think we need to consider further. Yes, Mr. Chen. As to the 2 points made by Mr. Yip, we agree with him. And as the chair has said, I have already promised that we would consider whether there should be a threshold. We're working on it. As to the other point made by Mr. Yip, I think it's a good idea. That is whether we can try to have it done back to back so as to take away the gap or try to narrow the gap. I think this is quite close to what Mr. Yip is suggesting, so please allow us time to work on it. Yes, we'll wait for your reply. So paragraph 6 isn't really the final version. It will still be fluid. Members, in relation to the response from the administration, any other questions, please? If members don't have other questions, let me deal with some follow-up work. This is because a lot was said on the definition of owners' organizations. Yes, we have got a reply from the administration. That is, the administration would like to keep it flexible so that owners' organizations would not be and should not be further defined. But then there are two possibilities in relation to property management organizations. First of all, an organization set up under a DMC, it must have the power to get resources from the owners to manage the property. The other one is the owners' corporations set up under Cap 344. The administration maintains that flexibility would be desirable. So, Department, please tell us how much flexibility are you talking about, and what form will such an organization take? And on what basis can the organization collect resources? So either you have the legal backing or you are empowered under the DMC. Otherwise, the owner can say no and would not chip in and would not pay for any management fees. So the administration has been talking about flexibility. Under what circumstances do we need the flexibility and in what form, please? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, currently it takes many forms. As far as owners' organizations are concerned, the most common type is owners' corporations.
But we also have the mutual aid committee, owners committee, and some are called cooperatives. So they take different forms. But of course, 76% of such organizations is taken up by OCs. But they are cooperative society, Federation of Owners Limited. So we must take care of or cover the MACs and cooperative societies, and we don't rule out that there may be other forms of owners organizations in the future. I asked a question about the basis on which these other organizations of owners are set up. If it's an OC is set up under the DMC, that's understandable. But what about others? MAC, cooperative societies? Are there legal provisions to empower them once they are set up? The most important power is to collect management fees. Yes, we have sought legal advice. If it's OC, then it's done under Cap 344 or the DMC, but there are other forms. Some are not supported by a statute. There may be a resolution of the owners of authorization from general meetings of owners, so that some of the powers can be exercised by the organization. Sometimes the contract is not properly signed. So our advice to owners is that owners organizations should be set up to do things on behalf of all the owners under Cap 344. And we're talking about part of the functions or powers of OCs. Well, Deputy Director, my question is this. If an organization is set up under the DMC, that's something we all understand. But do you have any buildings where they do not set up such organizations under the DMC? Or just 3 or 5 of the owners come together and say that they will manage the building? If that's the case, that organization has no power to collect management fees because it's not done under DMC and it's not authorized under Cap 344. So what powers do they have to collect management fees from other owners? Well, from what we have understood, these organizations can still collect management fees because the owners are willing to entrust these organizations to do this. But we haven't found any cases whereby the owners or organization in question cannot really exercise such powers. All right, anyway. Maybe I can take this up with the authority later. I would like to know on the basis on which the organization can collect management fees, or the owners must pay when asked. Because if there's no such power, then the owners can choose not to pay, and then things would become very complicated. Mr. Yip Kwok Kim. If we are talking about tenement buildings, is something set up by the owners. They then do self-management. But if there's no statutory basis, and some owners may choose not to go along with their decision. If it's a tenement building, there are 14 units, and then 2 or 3 may decide not to pay the management fee. I don't think you can take these owners to court. Is my understanding correct that only those who have agreed to join hands to do it would be obliged to do it? Well, when can we allow a property management company to enter and manage the building? Either it's done under the DMC or the CAP 344. But now we don't know what kind of organization may also be set up by the owner, and when there's a dispute, how can the disputes be resolved? If there are only 10 units, they may agree to hire a property management company. So that's why I think that we should restrict the definition of property owners organization to those set up under the DMC or CAP 344. Otherwise, the confusion that you have envisaged may become a reality. We're talking about a small minority of buildings. They don't have OCs, they don't have MACs, and usually the buildings are very old, and they were set up. The organizations were set up before the present-day laws were there, and it's not done under the DMC. It's a sort of contract. The members of a cooperative society may collectively sign a contract on how the building was to be developed and how it was to be managed. And now, of course, nowadays this will not happen. It's either done under the DMC or CAP 344. Members, any other follow-up questions? I agree that this is not an issue with new buildings, but you are providing a very loose wording in the bill. It may lead to unnecessary disputes. That's my point. I hope you can seriously consider my proposal, or perhaps next time when I sit over there, I can raise the questions again. Legal advisor, do you want to raise any legal points in respect of the administration's response? Yes, I want to raise a few points. First, paragraph 5 is a bit premature. The administration has proposed to amend the PMO. Are you going to amend Section 20A, or are you going to add a new clause? We're still considering the matter. The consultation on the PMO is still going on. It will end on the 2nd of February, and after we have collected all the views, we will come to a definite decision. Then paragraph 8 now is about who will be required to obtain the PMP license. It depends on the management portfolio of the PMC and also the organization structure. Are there objective criteria to be adopted by the PMSA? Are they going to be set out in subsidiary legislation? And is there a need to define management and supervisory or supervision? Because these terms can be loosely interpreted. Are there objective criteria in deciding who will be required to get a license? If so, are they going to be provided for in a piece of subsidiary legislation? I think we have considered these issues. The most straightforward approach is that when a PMC applies for a license from the authority, it has to submit its organization structure and also the management portfolio, how many housing estates are being managed by them, whether they are club houses or car parks, and then also the company's organization structure and division of labor, the post holders in the company. The post would decide which licenses and how many licenses would have to be applied for, and how many post holders would be required under the different tiers. We can set out the principle in the subsidiary legislation, but for the enforcement and implementation details, I think that would be provided for by the authorities' guidelines. And I don't think it's an easy task to further define what is meant by management or supervision. Since the authority would be provided with all the posts in the company, it would be for the authority to decide which is managerial and which is supervisory. If we look at a dictionary, look up in a dictionary, supervisory means that you have subordinates, or a subordinate or more than one subordinate. But managerial doesn't imply that you have subordinates. So how is the authority going to decide? Well, the legal advisor is correct. If you talk about supervision, you supervise other people, so you have subordinates. If it's managerial, you are responsible for management or for overseeing certain things. I think we'll leave this to the future authority to fill up with the details. The legislative intent is not to make it too much a nuisance. And we are asking those who are discharging managerial or supervisory duties to get a license. Frontline employees are doing important jobs, but we just don't want to make the licensing scheme too much of a nuisance, and therefore we do not require them to be licensed. Paragraph 12 on on the B, there are further subcategories. Are you saying that if they provide services in respect of security and fire services, then there's no need? We have 7 categories, A to G. And if they only do 9, one of those, then there's no need to get a license. And if they don't do A, C, D, E, F, G, and only responsible for security and fire services, then it's just one category. But if they do the fire safety and cleansing, then that belongs to 2 different categories. Then a license is required. If they do fire service and management of facilities, that is E, then a license is required. Legal advisor. Paragraph 18. The administration will consider whether the ordinance would be required. Amendment would be carried out so that property management services or monetary or other financial awards would be required to be licensed first. Are you talking about Section Clause 7 or other provisions? I'll ask our legal advisor, Michael, to say something on this. Maybe Clause 7 on exemptions, we would consider doing some amendment for that. For the free service, not for monetary, but what about payment in kind? some people may use this as a loophole. Last time I asked a question about the difference between providing property management services and acting as a PMC. Paragraphs 19, paragraph 20 and 21 do not really actually, or paragraph 19 and paragraph 20 are not a direct reply. Are you saying that if you are operating a business of property management service, then you're acting as a PMC? The understanding on the part of the legal advisor is correct. Maybe I can say something when we proceed to the consideration of clause 6. With regard to the questions and answers just raised and provided for any follow-up questions? All right. Then we may now continue with our cross-by-cross examination.
Last time we stopped at clause 4. Clause 4 is about disciplinary offences. Deputy Director, yes, if I may follow the previous practice, and that is we invite Mr. Kwok to tell us about the content, and should you have any questions, we'll be more than happy to take them. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Clause 4 is about disciplinary offences. A licensee commits a disciplinary offence if the licensee A. commits misconduct or neglect in a professional respect, B. contravenes a condition imposed on the licensee's license, C. contravenes a requirement in this ordinance that is applicable to the licensee, D. without reasonable excuse does not attend before the authority or the disciplinary committee when summoned to do so as a witness, or E. is convicted in Hong Kong or elsewhere of a criminal offence that first may bring the profession of property management services into disrepute, and second is punishable with imprisonment whether or not the licensee was sentenced to imprisonment. Thank you. Members, any questions on disciplinary offences? Any follow-up? All right. Yes, legal advisor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As far as the drafting of this clause is concerned, earlier on, I had a word with the administration. For paragraph D, it says, summoned to attend before the authority of the disciplinary committee as a witness. And then for clauses 21, 26, and 36, it also talks about giving evidence at a panel or the duty to provide information or documents. So I just wonder if 4D should have the scope expanded to cover those things that I've referred to. Mr. Chen, well, I think the legal advisor is most reasonable in his comment. We'll try to see if we need to revise the bill so as to expand the scope. We subscribe to the LA's view. LA, I didn't refer to the appeal tribunal, that is clause 36. So please also consider the case of the appeal tribunal. All right, if members don't have other questions, I myself have got a follow-up on this one. And that's in relation to the following point under disciplinary offences, Mr. Chen. For PMCs, certainly they will have something to do with Cap 344 or the enforcement of the DMC. If, say for example, a PMC in enforcing Cap 344 or the DMC fails to do things in line with the law, I want to know if you can refer to this scenario clearly under disciplinary offences. Well, our experience tells us that if you don't spell it out explicitly, then some owners corporations will say that since it is not against the law, so it is something in the gray area, and they think that there is room to maneuver, there's some leeway. So I just wonder if we should say the following, that is, if the PMC breaches the law when enforcing CAP 344 or DDMC, it would also be an offense. Mr. Chen. Well, it was studied in detail at the stage of the ACPMI. Other than the ordinance itself, there will be codes of practices, and then the authority will make it clear in the codes of conduct to say that PMCs must do certain things. Say, for example, giving assistance to the OCs to comply with CAP 344. Otherwise, it will be against the code of conduct or the code of practice. If they fail to do so, then according to this particular provision, it is a disciplinary offense. Mr. Reddy, follow up on your question, and then I have my own question. I want to know whether licensees must be an individual or a company. Can it be a registered company? And then breaching the CAP 344 will be regarded as a disciplinary offense. Yes, I can understand this point, but then of course the relationship between an OC and a PMC is such that some is being regulated by the other. Say, for example, owing to some historic reasons, there has always been non-compliance, and it can't be rectified within a short period of time, and then PMC cannot convince the members. Then I want to know whether this will be regarded as a disciplinary offense. Licensed companies, it must be an independent private company, a partnership, or a sole proprietorship or a limited company. It won't be an individual. A PMC means a company. The licensee is a company, not an individual. For the second scenario outlined by Mr. Lee, we say that all licensed PMCs must ask the OCs to perform the duties under CAP 344. If this cannot be done, I think the PMC must do something to facilitate the compliance. If it still fails, then should there be a complaint against the PMC and query whether it is tantamount to a disciplinary offense? I'm sure when the case goes to the authority will try to check whether due diligence has been exercised to persuade the OCs to follow the provisions of CAP 344, and then the authority would decide whether there is a disciplinary offense. And of course, we have the appeal mechanism. That is, the PMC or the PMP being complained, they can still lodge an appeal with the appeal panel. Mr. Reddy, if I may clarify this point. Licensee. According to the reply given by administration, a licensee can't be an individual, can't be a person. Of course, it's a company. PMC and licensee. I think licensee means the holder of a license. It will still be a company, right?
Yeah,
There are two types of licenses. One for companies, others for practitioners. Of course, for practitioners, it will be an individual. For company licensee, the licensee is a company. At the level of companies, the licensee will be a company, a sole proprietorship, a partnership, a limited company. For the practitioner licensee, then it is a natural person, not a corporation. Any other follow-up? Yes, let me follow up on my own question. Deputy Director, you have already said that probably in the form of a code of practice or in the schedule, then the PMC will be asked to discharge the duty. That is, it has the duty to urge the OCs to enforce the DMC and to follow the CAP 344. What is the difference of having it in the principal ordinance and under the subsidiary legislation? My understanding is that we'll pass the bill first and then we'll deal with the subsidiary legislation later. But then since you say that failure to do so would be a disciplinary offense, can you not include it now? Well, Mr. Chairman, the licensed company, the licensed PMC, must urge the OCs to follow the requirements under CAP 344. But then the owners' corporations must also be advised by the PMC to maintain the lifts properly, and there must be attention paid to fire safety, etc. If we are to lump together all the references in this bill, it would be unnecessary and it would be too messy and too restrictive, and the bill itself will be made too long. So in the principal ordinance, we'll talk about the disciplinary offences, and then the authority will look at the code of conduct, and as a licensing condition, the authority will impose this on the PMC and ask the PMC to urge the OCs to discharge the duty. Any questions? Mr. Kwok Kim. If I may take this up further with the director, the deputy director. Conditions imposed, licensing conditions imposed on the licensee. You're saying that the licensee will be a company, but then my understanding is that there is a person holding the license. He will be the license holder. It will be a person. Because it talks about 該人 in Chinese, the licensee. So it seems that you are talking about a company. It's getting confusing. In fact, in many companies, you have a person holding a license. So I regard that as the licensee. So what actually do you mean? Mr. Chen, the licensee includes the licensee of the company as well, the company licensee and individual licensee. Now, a licensing condition may say that when you receive information from your clients, you need to keep it confidential. So that may be one of the conditions among many other. If this is contravened, then it is a disciplinary offense. Now, for licensee in clause 4, it includes company licensee and practitioner licensee, both types. So we have natural persons as well as body corporate. In the case of a contravention, and if penalties are to be imposed, I want to know whether the person will be held responsible or the company. It depends on the nature of the incident, whether it is the practitioner that is breaching the law or the company that is breaching the law. In the case of the former, then the individual will be held liable, and then in the second case, the directors will be held liable. So in the case of a PMC licensee, then it will be the company being held liable. Now, if the OC insists on breaching a provision under CAP 344, the PMC knows full well that it is a breach. If the PMC doesn't follow the orders of the OC, then maybe the PMC will be fired. But if it goes ahead, then who will bear the consequences? Deputy Director. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When we conceived the licensing regime, The purpose was to enhance the quality of property management services. What we got in mind was that we would not allow PMCs to follow the OC's directive to breach the CAP 344. The right way to respond is to tell the OC that this is against the laws of Hong Kong, against CAP 344, and tell the OCs that it will be against the code of conduct. They will lose the client, they will also lose the license. So the right way to go about it is to give the advice and sternly urge the OCs to follow the law. If they do it, what will happen? They have to bear the consequences.
If the OC says, I will fire you if you don't obey my order, would that be an acceptable reason, justification? Well, if the PMC allows the OC to do something illegal, then the future authority would look into this. Why did the PMC allow the OC to do something illegal? My question is, if the PMC doesn't do something which it knows to be in contravention of CAP 344, but still the OC wants the PMC to do it, would the PMC be afforded protection? Well, if the PMC is then dismissed, then it would have to handle the matter according to the contract. And the OC must employ a licensed PMC. So the best course of action is to act in accordance with CAP 344. I'm talking about the protection afforded to the PMC if it's dismissed. I think it's a contractual matter. Maybe it's about seeking compensation arising from such dismissal. I think we are talking about two different levels. If there's no OC and there's no DMC, and it's run by the DMC manager, the first manager, and of course the PMC should come under the DMC manager. But in some buildings, there are OCs. The OCs holds all the power, and the PMC is just there to discharge their duties. The PMC may have a certain professional knowledge, saying that doing certain things will be in contravention of the law. But you should not say that the PMC should just resign if the OC wants to do something illegal. But it's not fair to ask the PMC licensee or manager to shoulder the responsibility, because they don't have to say. If the OC takes initiative to do something illegal and the PMC has no knowledge or pretends to have no knowledge, then I think this is a rare occurrence. Laws may be updated from time to time, and whether the OCs will be able to keep up, for example, fire safety regulations, you need to conduct inspection, you need to upgrade your facilities, but some OCs may not be able to cope, and the PMC can only give advice. The PMC cannot force the OC to do anything, and it's enforced by the Fire Services Department, and the Fire Services Department will prosecute the OC. Now you're asking the PMC practitioners, the managers, to shoulder the responsibility. How can you justify this? Well, the PMC has the expertise. It has the responsibility to ascertain that whatever is done is in line with the law. If there's an order from the FSD on fire safety installations, but that's just in the stage of giving advice, not a contravention. If something is not in line with the law and it's minor in nature, then of course you can offer advice all the time. But if it's about safety to people, the repair and maintenance of lifts, for example, and the OC is responsible for ensuring safety of all the residents, and the PMC should not tolerate contraventions of this nature. The FSD or the EMSD should be informed by the PMC. But for minor contraventions or minor requirements not being met, then you may argue whether the PMC should shoulder the responsibility. But for important issues such as people's safety, there should be zero tolerance, no tolerance. Yes, if it's important, it means life and death. The PMC should see to it that the OC has to do it. But does the PMC have the bargaining power? All the PMC can do is to resign. The PMC is there to help the OC discharging certain duties. The PMC can only give advice. It cannot really dominate what the OC has done. It's just like other employees. Whatever you are asked to do, you should not do anything illegal. Well, I understand Mr. Kwok's concern. I'm an auditor. If you say that all contraventions committed by the company would be the responsibility of the auditor, if the company does something wrong, should I be equally held liable? The chance of the OC asking the PMC to do certain things illegal is slim. But sometimes it's about omissions or the deadline of holding a certain meeting has expired, and the OC can do something without telling the PMC. For example, a notice may be issued without telling the PMC beforehand. So when you draft the guidelines, you have to pay attention to these issues. Of course, contraventions may be serious or may be just minor. And if it's a serious contravention, the PMC should be duty-bound to advise the OC. We, acting as auditors, would have the chance to tell the shareholders at the AGM about the contraventions committed by the company, and through the pressure brought by the shareholders, the company that will be asked to explain. So this is the pressure which would sort of ensure compliance. So perhaps we should ask the empower the PMC to make a report to owners at the AGM. But if things reach such a stage, the relationship would be very poor indeed. I don't think the OC would likely ask the PMC to do something in contravention of Cap 344, but there are many situations where you can contravene Cap 344 and they are not serious. But I don't think you should blame the PMC for every contravention committed by the OC. That's too much. That's a good suggestion. We agree with the concern expressed by Ms. Lee. We can take this back to the advisory committee to see how we can improve the matter, the arrangement. For example, like a shareholders AGM, we can allow the PMC to report to owners in the AGM on how things can be improved, or perhaps advice on can be offered on how to improve the buildings management, and they can also make suggestions for the consideration of owners as a whole. Is the PMC empowered to speak in the owners AGM? Then it will have to do with whether the PMC is empowered to add an item on the agenda. Well, the AGM can take many forms, and the PMC can inform the owners through different means, such as a circular, a notice. And in the future, this council will be involved in considering subsidiary legislation on the additional requirements. Can you consider doing this through positive vetting instead of negative vetting? Even minor changes may involve a long process of consultation or elaboration and clarification. If it's done under negative vetting, we may not have sufficient time, or we may not be able to allow a follow-up discussion. We'll have to consider this in the light of actual operation and the time frame for passing subsidiary legislation. I have some reservations about this. If we go down this route, it will be a very long and drawn-out legislative process. Well, actually, if need be, we can ask for an extension of the scrutiny period. I think we should think through. Otherwise, there will be major problems. I agree with Mr. Yip. There are strong voices in the community that we should legislate on the work of PMC. If from such minor matters we go for positive vetting, we'll have to use a lot of time to get things done. In the future, we'll have to consider the composition of the authority and also the schedule, codes of practice or guidelines to be decided by the authority. Even members here have divergent views. But under the existing arrangement, we can only spend 7 weeks, 4 plus 3 weeks, on such matters. You can ask for an extension. That's inclusive of an extension. Under Section 34, the usual arrangement is 3 plus 4. But if there's a summer break in between, then we have more time. But normally we have at most 7 weeks. It depends on the subsidiary legislation to be submitted by the authority. We need more time to consult the sector. So please consider whether you would certainly not consider positive vetting for this, or you are sure, you can tell us why you are sure that 7 weeks will always be sufficient.
I think the voice of the society is to pass the bill ASAP. There's a separate issue. You still have the subsidiary legislation, but then the licensing work cannot be done without the subsidiary legislation. So, and we can't even start the interim period. We need to pass the subsidiary legislation first before we can start the licensing work. So the authority will still be much restricted in its work. In other words, for a large number of subsidiary legislation, we've only got 7 weeks to scrutinize them. For the subsidiary legislation, we'll try to hand them in ASAP, and of course we can do so by batches. That's why just now we have asked you, sir, to let us have time to consider the subsidiary legislation. Here now we are focusing on the principal ordinance. Legal advisor, even if you talk about negative vetting in the principal ordinance, in the past there was this experience that for controversial issues, a subcommittee can be formed to look at the draft before moving on to the gazetto of the subsidiary legislation. Can this be done for more controversial issues? I think the better way to go about it is to introduce them batch by batch. We don't need to do so in one single lot. In this way, work can be made smoother and we can save time. I think this is experience for the scrutiny of other bills and subsidiary legislation. Deputy Director, can you not tell us roughly what will be involved so that we learn about the complexity of the case, so that we know whether in some cases we need to have a draft first and then form a committee to look at the draft before having the formal legislative process. I'm afraid that if the subsidiary legislation is complicated, we need more time to gather public views. Mr. Yip, I think the legal advisor is right. In the past, we have said that we would like to have an early view of the subsidiary legislation while working on the principal bill. Chairman, I think we can ask the admin to come to the panels, and then we study the matter first before formal gazetto. I think this was done in the past. But of course, I'm aware of the administration's concern. For positive vetting, that would mean a longer period of time. It is a fact. There are many things that we want to get done ASAP, so having that approach would get a problem. However, at the same time, for complex issues, we need time to have a thorough discussion. Deputy Director, anything to add? We'll consider the matter. Just now, I've heard members' views. it seems that the subsidiary legislation won't be simple. It involves the structure of the authority, the nature of the work, and the authority has to draw up conditions to be followed. I think the work of the authority has to be discussed here. The details won't be covered in the bill, right? Well, for the structure of the authority and the important things, yes, they will be found in the bill. As to the operation of the authority, but of course you find it in the code of practice, etc. But then for major issues like the power to appoint the authority and also the functions, yes, they can be found in the bill. It doesn't matter, Director. Deputy Director, next time when you come, tell us about your plan for introducing the subsidiary legislation by phases. We are concerned as to whether there will be sufficient time for us to follow this up. And then, if I may go back to the bill, clause 4, licensee. We are talking about the holders of licenses. But then if you go back to the interpretation, we have got licensed PMP Tier 1, licensed PMP Tier 2, licensed PMP, and licensed PMC. I think you better clarify this point. You have licensee, you have got licensed PMC, etc. Now, the explanation for licensee here, it says it means the holder of a license. When we talk about licensee, it means the holder of a license. Is anybody holding a license related to property management? It covers both licensed PMP and licensed PMC. In the case of a company, of course, it will be the company holding the license. In the case of a practitioner's license, then the holder will be an electoral person. So we are talking about both types of licensees. LA, Mr. Chairman, I'll try to assist. For page C2731, licensee, I think we have the licensed PMP Tier 1, licensed PMP Tier 2, they are individuals. We have also got licensed PMC. So 2 categories of persons and 1 category of companies. Maybe under licensee means the holder of a license, including the 3 categories that are referred to. Maybe that can clarify the provision. I wonder if it will be feasible. Well, licensee here means both types of licensees, and the disciplinary offences apply to both licensed PMPs as well as the licensed PMCs. LA, maybe you can provide supplementary information. That's whether the current drafting is already the most proper one, or whether it is better to spell out the different categories of licensees. Well, in context, it is clear, but my earlier proposal would make it even clearer. Licensee means the holder of a license, and then we have to look at the definition for license. You can go to C2729, and we have a definition for license, and there are 3 types of licenses, and licensees means holders of those 3 types of licenses. All right. That takes us to clause 5, Deputy Director. This is to empower the authority to issue codes of conduct. Codes of conduct may be issued for Section 4. For the purposes of Section 4, the authority may issue codes of conduct specifying the matters it considers to be relevant in determining the question of misconduct or neglect. A licensee does not incur civil or criminal liability only because the licensee has contravened a provision of the Code of Conduct. However, in any proceedings, whether disciplinary, civil, or criminal, if the authority, the disciplinary committee, or the court is satisfied that a provision of the Code of Conduct is relevant to determining a matter that is an issue in the proceedings, first, the Code of Conduct are admissible in evidence in the proceedings, and B, proof that a licensee contravened or did not contravene the provision may be relied on as tending to establish or negate that matter. The authority may amend the Code of Conduct, and the Code of Conduct and the amendments made to them may be published in any manner the authority considers appropriate. Neither the Codes of Conduct nor the amendments made to them are subsidiary legislation. Thank you. Members, any questions? No? Then our legal advisor. For Clause 5.1, for the drafting, I just wonder if the administration would agree with me that it is too restrictive. Now, you can only issue codes of conduct for the purposes of Section 4A. And what does 4A say? It says commits misconduct or neglect in a professional respect. Would you think that it is too restrictive? Say, for example, the PMC may have some financial duties. Now, I want to know whether you want to confine it to 5.1 or whether you want to expand the scope. Mr. Chen. Well, other than codes of conduct, the authority would issue other codes like codes of practice, etc. For the codes of conduct, it is mainly about misconduct. If they cannot follow the codes of conduct, it will be regarded as a disciplinary offense. The authority can also issue other codes of conduct, say, for example, covering the financial arrangements. Mr. Chen, well, you can check the powers and functions of the authority in the relevant part of the bill. Legal advisor, my understanding is that under the bill, there can only be 3 types of documents to be issued by the authority. First, subsidiary legislation. Second, codes of conduct and guidelines, but not any codes of practice. If you say that you can do so administratively, I can't help. But then I think if you want to empower the authority to issue codes of practice, please add it to the bill. The authority may issue other codes of practice. Yes, it may very well be able to do so, but how is it related to disciplinary offenses? Because it mentions codes of conduct only, but nothing else. If anything that would bring the profession into disrepute, I think the codes of conduct may cover such as well. But then that's about criminal offenses. You're referring to 4E, right? It doesn't mean that anything bringing the profession into disrepute will be covered. It is in relation to criminal offenses. For this issue, I think please give us time to go back to check to see whether it is as the LA has said that it is too restrictive and we need to expand the scope. Please give us time to study the matter. And let me check similar provisions elsewhere in the laws of Hong Kong. Legal advisor, anything to add? 5. Clause 5, subclause 5. It is said that the codes of conduct and amendments made to them may be published in any manner the authority considers appropriate. Subclause 6 says that neither codes of conduct nor the amendments made to them are subsidiary legislation. But then the administration has said that it is necessary to gazette them. Please comment. The understanding is correct. We hope that we can gazette the codes of conduct to publish them. Legal advisor, what is your comment? Yes, it means that it will be gazetted, but it won't be subsidiary legislation. The LegCo cannot comment or do anything about it because we have the government notice as well as the other types of gazette notices. So it's better to spell it out more clearly. According to subclause 5, it will be published in Gazette. But then contravention will not be regarded as breaching the bill. Deputy Director, please tell us why. Now, for subsidiary legislation, it will be subject to negative vetting. The most we can get will be 7 weeks. Why are you saying that you want to specify that the codes of conduct won't be subsidiary legislation?
I'll ask Michael to say something about this. Generally speaking, codes of conduct are not subsidiary legislation. Otherwise, they would not be called codes of conduct. Because codes of conduct provide guidelines on the behavior expected of the licensee. When the authority considered whether there's a disciplinary offense, then it would consider whether the codes of conduct have been complied with. We have the principal ordinance and also subsidiary legislation, and then apart from that, we have codes of conduct. If the codes of conduct are put in the subsidiary legislation, they are no longer codes of conduct. And then we will have covered all the codes of conduct and codes of practice in our subsidiary legislation. Legal advisor, in other laws, in other ordinances, are codes of conduct not considered subsidiary legislation? In clause 4, we're talking about disciplinary offenses, not criminal offenses. And the authority is not going to deal with such offenses, not as criminal offenses. Perhaps you can check and tell us later. Legal advisor? Thank you, Mr. Yip, for your question. Whether it's a code of practice or code of conduct, normally it's not considered subsidiary legislation, but under some ordinances, although such codes of conduct or codes of practice are not regarded as subsidiary legislation, but there will be some arrangements made for LegCo to scrutinize them. For example, those under the anti-discrimination ordinances. Can you give us some information on the contents that the codes of conduct would cover? We need to know whether these are serious issues which should better be covered by subsidiary legislation. We have to know the complexity of such a codes of conduct. Or whether the scope is narrow. Legal advisor, so codes of practice are not regarded as subsidiary legislation, My recollection is that they are not considered as subsidiary legislations under many ordinances. Or such a codes of practice may be issued administratively. In this bill, we only have codes of conduct, but no codes of practice. I know that. There are codes of practice under the Buildings Ordinance, and those codes are not subsidiary legislation. They are regarded as non-subsidiary legislation. Under the Buildings Ordinance, the Director of Buildings is authorized to prepare such codes. This is not in dispute, but we need to know from the Deputy Director what contents will be covered by the codes of conduct and whether they should be treated as subsidiary legislation. Well, in the past, we were told that we should allow flexibility for frequent and regular changes. For example, under the Buildings Ordinance, the codes of practice will cover the use of different construction material, and so on. So basically, these are not considered as subsidiary legislation. As I've said, codes of conduct, codes of practice are usually not considered as subsidiary legislation, but under some ordinances there will be an arrangement for members here to scrutinize them. If there's no further question, then I think we have more or less completed part 1. We would proceed to part 2 next, but only Mr. Yip and I are remaining, so may I propose that we leave this part to the next meeting. Deputy Director, please provide the information required before the next meeting. Next time we are going to proceed to the scrutiny of part 2. The meeting will be held on 9th of February at 10:45 in Room B. If there's no further question, then I would adjourn the meeting now. Thank you.